Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Russia hit Ukraine with another aerial attack, leaving 70% of Kyiv without power. Poland's consulate in Odessa was also targeted. We will bring you more on that in just a moment, but first, more of tonight's top stories.
We choose NATO. We choose the Kingdom of Denmark. We choose the EU.
The Prime Minister of Greenland says his people prefer to remain part of Denmark as Trump pushes to take the island. Donald Trump tells protesting Iranians to occupy public offices and ensures help is on its way. And Marine Le Pen's final appeal to her 5-year ban on holding public offices begins. We begin our program with the latest from Ukraine as Russia continues its offensive on Ukraine's power grid, with 70% of Kyiv left without power amid freezing temperatures. To get an update on the latest attack, we now go live to our correspondent in Kyiv, Katerji. Good evening, Oz. So it's great to have you back. Tell us more about the attacks on Ukraine. Are these heavy bombings meant to actually force Ukraine's citizens to put pressure on their government?
Well, look, the Ukrainian authorities say that Russia's trying to effectively disconnect the Ukrainian people from their power grid. These attacks, sustained attacks against Ukraine's energy infrastructure, are taking place where temperature right now, where I'm standing here in Kyiv, is minus 12 degrees. We've had at least 20 hours worth of power cuts in my apartment alone. That's right in the center of Kyiv. So if it's this bad right in the heart of the old city, you can imagine how bad it is for those people on the outskirts of the city and in the region after a thermal power plant was once again hit by Russia in an overnight barrage. The Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched 293 drones, 18 ballistic missiles and 7 cruise missiles, again targeting that energy infrastructure, which is making life incredibly difficult for hundreds of thousands of city residents of Kyiv alone. That's Zelensky speaking this morning. But elsewhere, Sumy, Kharkiv was hit. 4 people killed in Kharkiv after Russia struck a postal service, the Nova Pochta, the courier service here in Ukraine, killing 4 people there. So again, it's a very, very difficult situation for the Ukrainians to be in as Russia continues to bombard as temperatures are well below freezing.
So in this most recent attack, as I mentioned, the Polish consulate in Odessa was also hit. Do we know anything more? Were there any people inside? Was it badly damaged? What can you tell us?
Yeah, this was confirmed by the Polish Foreign Ministry in Warsaw that this took place, that luckily there isn't a lot of damage. It wasn't a significant hit and nobody was injured. That's according to the Polish Foreign Ministry. Here is Maciej Wiewiór, the Polish Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
As a result of today's attack, the building of the Polish consulate in Odessa was damaged. Windows were shattered. A silver lining is that the attack occurred at night, so the consulate crew was reduced and nobody got hurt.
Now, this isn't the first time that a Polish consular or embassy building has been struck in Ukraine. You'll remember at the end of last year in September 2025, a Polish consular building was hit here in the capital of Kyiv. So this shows Russia's recklessness in these attacks. They are targeting civilian infrastructure, but also risking creating a diplomatic escalation by hitting these embassy buildings. So a very, very difficult position for the Ukrainians to be in. And again, the government here is stressing that they need more support in the field of air defense to protect their skies from attacks like this.
Thank you so much, Oz. Stay warm, stay safe, and keep us updated. This was Katerji reporting live from Kyiv. 2,000 lives. This is a rough estimate of how many Iranians were brutally killed during the escalating protests across the country as people pursue the end of the Islamic Republic. As they continue to identify deceased loved ones, the UN warns of a shocking scale of violence. Representatives of the regime are trying their luck by reaching out for talks. It may, however, be too late, as President Trump just announced that help is on its way. John Todd reports.
Shrieks of grief as corpses continue to pile up at this morgue close to Iran's capital, Tehran. An Iranian official admitted to Reuters on Tuesday that around 2,000 people have been killed during the Islamic Republic's crackdown on the past fortnight's protests. Rights groups claim the death toll tops 3,000, while the broadcaster Iran International put the figure at 4 times that. The United Nations says the level of violence is shocking.
We are horrified by the mounting violence directed by security forces at protesters across Iran.
Demonstrations started in late December in response to soaring inflation, which quickly turned political, with protesters demanding an end to clerical rule. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen posted that
sanctions on those responsible for the repression will be swiftly proposed.
While the German Chancellor, who's on a trip to India, said the Islamic Republic's days were numbered.
We are now seeing the last days and weeks of this regime. It has no legitimization through elections among the population.
Experts say the protests look different to previous uprisings, with demonstrators taking on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
They are in their thousands. They are across Iran, in all cities, towns. They are the ones who do not allow the uprising to die down. The second is that the protests have become more confrontational.
The regime knows that it's on its last legs. So they either gonna come heavy and continue cracking down, and people would get scared and then apathetic, and then they would come out sooner or later again. Or there will be actually a successful revolution. So meaning a profound change and deposing the theocratic regime.
Representatives of the regime, led by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said communication lines with the US remain open. But Donald Trump said on social media that he had cancelled proposed meetings and promised protesters help was at hand.
Save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way.
US Senator Lindsey Graham said the American help could result in a massive wave of military, cyber and psychological attacks on Iran. John Todd for TVP World.
Let's move away from Iran to the UK, where Greenland's Minister for Business, Mineral Resources, Energy, Justice and Gender Equality visited Parliament to discuss the issue of Greenland's autonomy amid concerns regarding potential US interference. Joining me now from London is our reporter Sonia Gatavishchan, who has more on the latest from the British capital. Good evening, Sonia. So a lot has been said about Greenland today. There's definitely been a firm response to POTUS and his words. Are we receiving clear messaging?
Good evening, Klaudia. Today's events certainly brought clarity, but allow me to reflect on that in the wider context. Amid continued threats coming from the United States, the future of Greenland may seem uncertain in the international arena. However, it is not because Greenland's semi-autonomous territory of Denmark is undecided about its path. If anything, today, Prime Minister of Greenland pointed out that its choice between the United States and Denmark is clear, and this is how he described it.
Greenland will not be a part of the USA. We choose the Greenland we know today, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Now we are faced with a geopolitical crisis, and if we have to choose between the USA and Denmark, here and now, we choose Denmark. We choose NATO. We choose the Kingdom of Denmark. We choose the EU. This is not the time for internal discussions and division. This is the time to stand together and build on the community we know and we want.
And let me just add that the UK, the place where we are right now, is far from indifferent pertaining to the future of Greenland. In fact, reportedly, the United Kingdom, with Germany and together with other European NATO allies, has been discussing the enhancement of a military force in the Arctic island. Moreover, as you pointed out, the energy minister of Greenland was just hosted here, and she highlighted important perspectives that Greenland is not looking to go to war, that Greenland Greenland has been a staunch ally of the United States, and that, if anything, they are disappointed by the latest actions that we are witnessing from the U.S., which are also harmfully impacting Greenland's people. This is what she said.
If you ask the people of Greenland, there are quite a bit of worry. People are concerned about the messages from the United States about annexing Greenland or buying Greenland. It causes a great deal of worry about the future.
Polish President Karol Nawrocki was on an official visit to London today. Did he and Prime Minister Starmer manage to address tensions between Greenland and the U.S.?
Formally, this was not part of the agenda of the meeting between Polish President Karol Nawrocki and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. However, this question did come up at the press conference that followed, and this is how the Polish president, who is perceived as an ally of Donald Trump, a European ally of Trump, addressed the issue.
We are aware of the strategic importance of Greenland. I expect this issue to be resolved diplomatically between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Denmark. Responsibility for security and the values of the free world, a world to which Poland is so close, and of which it is, in fact, a part, is to a fundamental extent taken on by the North Atlantic Alliance, led by the United States.
The discussion on Greenland will continue on Wednesday, when foreign ministers of Greenland and Denmark will meet with the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and State Secretary Marco Rubio. But if we are to judge the situation by today's events, for Greenland, that conversation is clear, the future is clear, and it rests with Denmark. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was Sonia Gatabiszczan reporting live from London. This could well be a plot of a Dan Brown movie. The Polish ambassador in Moscow was summoned by officials to provide explanation regarding the recent arrest of a Russian archaeologist in Warsaw who is accused of unauthorized excavations in Crimea. Anastasia Yanchenko took a closer look at why Moscow is reluctant to let this go, as the court's verdict is set to be announced on January 15th.
A strong protest. That is what the Polish ambassador in Moscow, Krzysztof Krajewski, has received from the Russian Foreign Ministry. Moscow's displeasure was triggered by the December detention of Russian archaeologist Alexander Butyagin in Warsaw at Ukraine's request, where he is accused of carrying out illegal excavation in annexed Crimea. Moscow dismissed the charges as absurd.
The Polish ambassador was presented with evidence confirming that Alexander Butyagin, who is a world-renowned Russian archaeologist and a staff member of the State Hermitage Museum, has conducted research on the Kerch Peninsula for several decades. Throughout this period, Mr. Butyagin's work was duly authorized by the relevant authorities, including those of Ukraine, prior to 2014.
Meanwhile, Poland's foreign ministry confirmed the incident and outlined its stance.
During the meeting, the Russian side presented its position regarding the detention of a Russian citizen in early December 2025, who was wanted in connection with his actions on Ukrainian territory. On the Polish side, the case is being handled in accordance with applicable procedures.
Alexander Butyagin arrived in Warsaw on December 3rd on an Italian tourist visa. He had been scheduled to give a lecture in the Polish capital, but was arrested the following day by Polish law enforcement. He had been on the radar of Ukrainian security services since 2024. According to the SBU, his so-called archaeological expedition to the peninsula cost roughly 4 million euros in damage to Ukraine.
In 2014, he led an expedition later visited by Vladimir Putin. For more than a decade, the group conducted illegal excavations at a Ukrainian cultural heritage site in occupied Crimea, including the archaeological complex, ancient city of Myrmekion, near Kerch, causing serious damage to the cultural layer.
On January 12th, a Polish court agreed to extend Butyagin's arrest until March 4th. The court said the Russian national could flee Poland if released. His lawyer, Adam Damański, disagreed with the court's decision.
Alexander has a temporary place of residence in Poland with a registered address provided for him. We also believe he is not someone who could obstruct the proceedings, and we will present this in the appeal.
Ukraine has formally requested Poland to extradite the suspect. But whether that happens or not depends on what evidence the Ukrainians present in a Polish court. Some say that even if the court approves extradition, the archaeologists won't remain in Ukraine for long.
Ukraine would effectively add him to its pool for citizen exchanges, and there would be an opportunity to exchange him for one or more of its own citizens.
Butyagin's fate is set to be decided in Warsaw on January 15th, when the decision is set to be made whether to extradite him or not. Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
This is Marine Le Pen's final chance to turn the tides on her pending sentence. For her misuse of funds, the far-right leader was sentenced to 4 years in prison and to pay a €100,000 fine. And yet, nothing was a more painful blow than her 5-year ban of holding public offices. If she loses this appeal, the consequences could be far greater than first assumed. Piotr Miszczuk shares what these consequences would mean for the face of the French far-right.
This is Marine Le Pen entering the Élysée Palace, the residence of the French president, the office that has been her long-standing ambition. After she lost 2 presidential runoff elections in 2017 and 2022, both to incumbent President Macron, moving into the palace seems further than ever. Last April, she was handed down a ban from holding public office for 5 years. Now her last chance appeal has just begun.
I hope I will be heard by the appeal court. I am feeling hopeful, in a way.
Le Pen was found guilty of paying her party's officials the money that was earmarked for European Parliament assistance. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison, 2 of which were suspended, and €100,000 fine. But the 5-year ban on holding public office is extremely painful as well.
If the judge bars her from running in 2027, she will be able to contest the ruling in the Supreme Court, but the case will not be set before the election in 2027.
If she loses the trial, she might be meted out an even harsher sentence. She could also be stripped of her seat in the lower house of the French parliament, and it's unlikely the court will overturn the original verdict, experts say.
It looks like it's more likely that the verdict will be more or less of the same because, as you say, the accusations are quite important and justified.
Her political demise would be an opportunity for her protégé, Jordan Bardella, who currently serves as president of her party, the National Rally.
Is taking the light, and they are preparing for the succession when it comes to the candidacy of the presidential election in 2027. If we look at the polls, we know that some recent polls were unveiled a few weeks ago, and Bardella would win in the current circumstances in all situations.
But he says he believes Le Pen will manage to prove her innocence and claims to have a whole different idea for himself.
Once again, I am not a candidate for the presidential election. I might give you a scoop. I'm a candidate for the position of Prime Minister.
But according to a poll commissioned by French newspaper Le Monde, Bardella may have a much higher chance of winning presidency, 49% against Le Pen's 18%. But all those scenarios are contingent upon the verdict in Le Pen's case, which is set to be announced before the summer. For TVP World, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
The European Commission has laid out strict rules for Chinese car manufacturers wanting to sell to the EU market. This comes as Europe's car industry continues to struggle, leading to thousands of job losses across the sector. Our Europe correspondent Alex Katerji has this report.
Well, the European Commission laying down the rules, laying down the law when it comes to Chinese electric vehicle makers who want to sell their cars in Europe. At the moment, they are subjected to a 35% tariff from the EU as they come into the bloc. This is to prevent unfair competition from vast Chinese government subsidies supporting those companies. Now, if they want to sell electric vehicles in Europe, Chinese car makers will have to offset that advantage. They will have to have minimum prices so that they're not competing unfairly against European car makers. Now that will come as welcome news, this firm stance from the Commission, from the European auto industry. We've heard in the last few hours from a trade body representing the automobile parts industry saying that in the last 2 years that industry has lost 100,000 jobs across the bloc. Now, let's compare it. In 2020-2021, the start of the COVID pandemic, that industry lost 53,000 jobs. In 2024 alone, they lost 54,000 jobs. So strict rules from the Commission, holding firm in the face of a wave of Chinese government subsidies, giving preferential treatment to Chinese EV makers. Clearly, Europe's car industry is struggling. In Brussels, I'm Alex Katerji for TVP World.
A viral video showing a car plunging through a frozen reservoir in Poland's Wodzisław Śląski has landed two pranksters in hot water. As police confirmed, the stunt was also a real-life emergency that could lead to prison time. Randy Potts has the story.
The dramatic video footage shows an Opel driving across the ice with its doors flung open before the surface gives way and the car sinks. While many viewers dismissed the clip as an AI-generated hoax, police launched an investigation which led them to a reservoir near Młodzieżowa Street.
The specialist water rescue and diving group from Bytom conducted the underwater search. The divers went underwater to search the bottom for the car's remains. It ended with confirmation that there were no people there.
Though there were no obvious tracks left on the ice, a diving rescue team confirmed the video's authenticity when they discovered the submerged car. Two men, a 45 and 29-year-old, have since confessed. The suspects now face up to 3 years behind bars. The message? Hey kids, don't do this at home.
And now time to revisit one of our major topics of today, the U.S.-EU relations in light of persistent calls by President Donald Trump to annex the Arctic island of Greenland. Joining me now on the program is Jan Zielonka, professor of politics at the University of Venice. Professor, great to have you on World News Tonight. Thank you for joining.
Nice to be with you.
I would like to start by drawing a comparison and understanding the difference in dynamic between the EU and the US. In your 2006 book, Europe as an Empire, you argued that EU operates as a neo-medieval empire with fuzzy borders, with divided sovereignty, with power that is being the power that is being explored through governance rather than actual military force. When we look at the US, there is a contrast with the Westphalian model where we have borders and concentrated power. With what's happening with President Trump and these calls to get Greenland one way or the other, how do you interpret this clash between this Westphalian model and the neo-medieval Europe?
European model was very successful. Let's not forget that there was the Soviet Union, which was more powerful than contemporary Russia. And we have brought downfall of the Soviet Union without a single shot. Sure, there was the military deterrence and American role in this, but there was also trade, international law, and normative, or if you prefer, ethical policy, which led to disintegration of the Soviet Union. We also stabilized the post-Soviet environment by embarking on the policy of enlargement, which again was not based on military aspects. Of course, in the ideal world, actors should have not just soft power, but also hard power. But let's also not underestimate the role of soft power in building American strength. Because if you have soft power, you basically make other actors do what you want, not because you apply expensive carrots or sanctions, but because they play the role of the game, and they may even think that what you propose is good for them. If you don't have this normative power or international law, you have to, apply bayonets each time you want to make other actors do what you want. And as Napoleon famously said, you can do many things with bayonets, but not to sit on them.
So with Donald Trump's firm stance on Greenland and on taking over, what do you think should be EU's response next? How do you maintain a cordial relationship with the US while maintaining your position and showing your power?
Look, I'm in an international project which try to study power in its various dimensions. and the EU is nearly on par with China and much above Russia, India, or other global powers. So the EU is not totally toothless. And there is discrepancy in military might, but do we really expect that there will be military clash between EU and the United States? I don't think so. The Greenland case is difficult, but we are still not there. The problem, of course, is if the black scenario materializes, that actually the current administration is not just taking lip service to old NATO allies, but actually change sides and join hands with our arch enemy Putin. Mm-hmm. Well, there are some signs that this black scenario might be actually legitimate. If you consider that Donald Trump and his people support parties in Europe, which to a large extent are financed by Moscow, then you wonder what is the situation. Or if you look at for instance, the latest security doctrine, which is rather critical of Europe and not of Russia, then you also wonder, or consider the latest so-called peace proposal for Ukraine, which basically accepted all Russians' demands. So there are reasons to worry about the worst case scenarios. And we have to be prepared for that.
But I would like to...
we are still not there.
We're still not there, but we have to consider different scenarios, as you said it yourself. Let's take a look at NATO. NATO was built on the assumption that the risk, the danger is actually coming from outside, not from within. With the current situation, NATO is... the US is NATO's most powerful member, and it could potentially go against another member of the NATO alliance, Denmark. Do you think that NATO can survive if such occurrence would take place?
I don't think NATO can survive. I'm not sure any longer whether Article 5, which is actually the fundament of NATO, is still valid. European response about Greenland will not be military. Yes, I know that some politicians think we should send European troops to Greenland, but I think it would be totally silly. We cannot have a military conflict with America for various reasons. But we have other means to make America listen. We, in the field of trade, for instance, or we can sanction mega tech firms from America. We can refuse to pay taxes without taxes from our side vis-à-vis the United States. Here, where Europe has real teeth. But most importantly, you see, power politics is not only about muscles. Power politics is also about brain. And we should use our brain and be simply smart in conducting European policy vis-à-vis the United States. So I don't really believe that we should make an empty gesture or write aggressive tweets on platform X. No, we should simply stand our ground and make America aware that we are not going to buy everything they propose. This would require unity, which is sometimes lacking, but because there are politicians in Europe which try to capitalize on this behavior of President. But I think there are enough reasonable politicians in Europe, including even Prime Minister of Italy, which you would not expect that she would side with Europeans because she is a favorite of President Trump. And yet she understands that European cooperation matters. I'm not even talking about other people who you have now on the screen.
Professor, just before we go, because our time on the show is coming to an end, sadly, if you had 60 seconds to speak to the European leaders who could potentially be watching us this very moment, what would you tell them right now about the situation in Greenland, how to act with the US, and what the future of Europe could be?
No, stand your ground. Don't overblow the importance of Greenland. For the future of Europe, but you defend your member state, Denmark, and you tried to go for negotiated solution which meets security demands of the United States, provided that this is real concern. Because if security is only an excuse for Americans, but because it is about land grab, so to speak, in a legal way, then there is little to talk about. And we have to be prepared to stand the ground.
Thank you so much, Professor Jan Zielonka, Professor of Politics at the University of Venice, was my guest here on World News Tonight. Professor, good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and I hope to see you back here on TVP World for more news and features in just a moment.